Ayanokoji is one of the most psychologically complex characters in fiction. There is an extensive mystery surrounding his character, from his traumatizing past in the White Room to his genuine cold-hearted demeanor. Ayanokoji desires one thing: to experience everyday high school life, make friendships, and discover what it feels like to love someone and be loved. The motivations behind these desires are ambiguous. However, the root of the issue lies within Ayanokoji's upbringing. The White Room was a harsh and brutal place where children were physically and academically tested every day to push their limits. Because of this, the children used to die or fall into an equally horrible downward spiral. The goal of this learning environment, if you can even call it that, was to make the ideal human in every facet of one's imagination in both academic and physical performance. The White Room forced children to push the limits of the human condition. Those too young to comprehend the cruelty of this world experienced an abhorrent hell watching their friends die from failure in an environment of Darwinism defined by the survival of the fittest. We do not know precisely the horrors Ayanokoji experienced, just that the pressure of the environment stripped away every ounce of emotion in his mind. In the pursuit of making Ayanokoji the most perfectly logical human being, he became a sociopath void of humanity. I think Ayanokoji understood somewhere down the line that he was losing the components of himself that made him human. The concept of a perfect human is a contradiction in its own right, because being imperfect is what makes you human. Perfection is unattainable, and it means there's no room to grow, nothing left to learn. It's a wall bordering on monstrous. And so, to attempt to revert some of the psychological damage done to him before it left permanent scars, he needed to escape. As he enters the Tokyo Advanced Nurturing High School, Ayanokoji desires to detach himself from his traumatizing past completely. As this high school plays by its own set of rules, including disassociating its students from contacting the outside world, this environment was the best place for Ayanokoji to seek refuge. Constantly being the center of attention in the White Room and always being watched, Ayanokoji's goal is simply to blend in with the crowd. And the big brain mad lad purposely gets an average score in every subject on his entrance exams, getting 50s across the board to be placed in Class D, the class of defects. But this is where the contradiction of Ayanokoji's character sets in. By attempting to project himself like an average Joe, his actions come off as premeditated, inviting scrutiny from the faculty. Getting an average score in and out of itself doesn't warrant investigation, but alarm bells start ringing when it baselines complete consistency. Ayanokoji instead projects his true defective nature by attempting to come off as average. And because Ayanokoji is the perfect logical human, the action was intentional. As a result, his teacher Chabashira Sensei and his deskmate Suzune Horikita become exposed to the iceberg tip of Ayanokoji's sociopathic demeanor. In a class full of defects, the most effective student in Class D is Ayanokoji. As perfect and logical as he is, the skill that Ayanokoji lacks is communication and emotional self-awareness. Ayanokoji's flawed demeanor highlights the main problem with the White Room: neglecting the inhuman education methods. They didn't develop the communication and social skills of an individual. That's why Ayanokoji talks abnormally in this monotone voice for 99% of the time. For example, in his introduction in his first year. It was so plain and bland that it almost became comedic, not because it's funny, but because it's sad. Ayanokoji has a legitimate inability to express his thoughts and feelings in front of many people. The Tokyo Advanced Nurturing High School is a microcosm of society, a meritocracy where the elite stands at the top and influences the bottom line. Ayanokoji couldn't care less about this system, but his true goal above all else is to be free of his father, like Icarus to Daedalus. As I stated before, Ayanokoji hates unnecessary attention, so his logical mind came to a simple conclusion. If I perform averagely and blend in, I'll garner less attention. Ayanokoji is motivated to prove his father wrong. It is not the nature that defines the individual, but nurturing the individual to influence development. He will help Class D ascend to Class A, not because he actually cares, but because it will ideologically oppose his father. Ayanokoji wants to seem normal, avoid unnecessary attention, and prove his father wrong by not using his extraordinary abilities and leading a normal high school life. But Ayanokoji fails in this aspect. The majority of the time, he has been forced to utilize his talents to resolve the problems affecting him and his class. He uses his physical abilities to save Suzune from her elder brother. He helps Irie with his big brain skills, and he uses both to defeat Ryuin in more than one way. Ayanokoji becomes the puppet master, pulling the strings of conflict and plot, deliberately intervening while keeping his identity concealed, and when the revelation of his work is exposed, he enforces credit on others. He walks a tightrope, balancing between utilizing his abilities but coming off as extraordinarily usual. But if he doesn't want that unnecessary attention, why does he behave in a way that will give him just that, undue attention? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. It's because Ayanokoji is a perfectly logical human. In Classroom of the Elite, every character exemplifies various ideological perspectives. The main issue is a disconnect between the realm of ideals and reality. Idealism versus realism. The Tokyo Advanced Nurturing High School is a meritocracy, a microcosm of society. Ideals won't do you justice because the real world is full of injustice. Equality in itself is an ideal. Ayanokoji is the living embodiment of perfect logic applied in every conceivable way. He is also perfectly alone. Ayanokoji wants to feel connected and trusted by others. And so the logical way of approaching such a predicament is to earn trust with action. Ayanokoji becomes a reflecting glass. People infer their goodwill onto his emotionless state because of the positive outcome of his actions. Despite his lackluster demeanor, people have no choice but to see him as the hero under these circumstances. Ayanokoji does good things not because he cares either way, but because it's logical. Despite this, Ayanokoji honestly does want to experience emotion and normalcy. Still, because of 15 years of detachment from any human emotion, thanks to the White Room and his father, everything for him is just data, information. Ayanokoji is cold-hearted, not by choice or design, but by the tragedy of his formative years. Ayanokoji wants to be free from the burdens that constrict him. He wants to completely escape the mental prison confining his traumatic past and not become the perfect human because that in itself is an oxymoron. Ayanokoji wants to embrace his flaws and understand himself to make friends. But most importantly, Ayanokoji wants to be human.